This is Lecture 42. I want to talk about coastal summer communities, namely the Hamptons, about an hour and a half from New York City. And of course, I'm going to link this back to climate change adaptation. So in the New York Times today, there's a long article about the booming market for summer homes along the Atlantic coast in the Hamptons. And so as you can see in this photo, this is a pretty place to be, but there's concern about, the New York Times reports today that there's worry that those properties that are more elevated and thus at lower risk of being flooded, they're renting at a higher price and they're renting more quickly. And so perhaps not a coincidence given Hurricane Sandy, we're already seeing people demanding properties that they perceive to be safer in the face of climate change, or at least in the face of greater flood risk. And that's the point of what I want to talk about. So here's my adaptation recipe. In step 1, new information about new risks we face, such as coastal flood risk, arrives, Hurricane Sandy being an example of such a salient event. In step 2, the people who want to live in, at least temporarily during summer vacations, who want to live in the Hamptons and vacation in the Hamptons, they, after a Hurricane Sandy and after reading the New York Times and whatever news they follow, they update their subjective probabilities, which is a fancy word for they change their views of the risks, the benefits and costs of living at a specific location. And after Hurricane Sandy, these coastal properties that aren't elevated are viewed as more risky and demand falls. So in step 3, the price for risky assets, i.e. homes that could flood, decline, and prices for homes, safe assets, homes that are viewed as elevated and facing objectively less risk and less likely to flood, their price goes up. Market price system at work. This is the invisible hand. In step 4, there's always supply and demand. On the supply side, product suppliers notice this change in the price gradient, that if you have a home that is objectively safer in the face of potentially more likely Hurricane Sandys, that you can rent it at a higher price to some vacation family. And this influences investments by those homeowners. They might elevate their homes so they can rent them for more. And this could stimulate firms to engage in endogenous innovation, R&D, research and development, to come up with new ways to protect homes against flood risk. And as I say in step 5, that's such innovations are random variable. Some of the efforts will fail and some will succeed. But by a law of large numbers, some will succeed. And now we're on step 6. Consumers, after this innovation process, after on the supply side, these entrepreneurs come up with new ways to protect coastal properties, consumers, i.e. the people who rent these homes and live in these homes, will have a greater menu of adaptation strategies to choose from. I'm cracking a joke here about floating homes, but that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. But the consumers have greater choice because of the supply side response, and there's been this supply side response because for-profit companies see that they can earn a higher rate of return if people feel safe in areas that are objectively at higher risk than in the past because of climate change. So the challenge of climate change and future Hurricane Sandys has actually created a market for opportunities, and folks are going to step up. Nature abhors a vacuum, as does capitalism. And so the net effect of this effort, as shown in today's New York Times, is sort of the small ball of climate change adaptation. No government here. Government might have provided the information that the coastal areas were increasingly at risk, but this is the private sectors, the small ball of adaptation, and this is some of the key points in Climatopolis that I just want to keep hammering home.